Welcome to the presentation for assessment and evaluation. This is an exam-based contact session for all the exams that you will write in 2018. My name is Ms. Tangi Eva Ausiku, and I am your tutor for assessment and evaluation. Before we go any further, I would like you all to enjoy studying assessment and evaluation with me. Assessment and evaluation is very important and plays a vital role in our education. It is also most likely that you will learn about different assessment practices in designing your own assessment activities. However, you might not know all of them based on the book that you will get or the information or other material that you will consult, but also as you go through your teaching career, assessment and evaluation designs and activities will become clear for you. Students, I would urge you all to commit to your studies. Make sure you allow enough time to go through your work and prepare well for your exams. You may feel free to contact me if there are any difficulties that you may incur on the following numbers, on the 081-2902-871 or alternatively 081-4426-310, or you can drop me an email on tajtangi@gmail.com. I also urge you to form up WhatsApp groups so that you can be able to share ideas and information with other students. Do feel free to also consult the internet and not just be bound to the study guide. Students, before we go on, there are going to be different verbs or different words that you will encounter when you are writing your exams, and these are the Bloom's taxonomy of verbs. You will be in the exams asked to define, you will be asked to compare, to describe, to determine, to discuss, and to explain. These are different levels on how our questions have been prepared for you. So if you are asked to define, you need to give a precise, brief meaning on something. If you are asked to compare, you need to make similarities and differences between two things. Clearly, students, do not write mixing up things where you say, I'm talking about the left brain now, and all of a sudden you're talking about the right brain. Clearly give me the similarities. Usually it works best if you give it to me in a tabular form. But if you do want to write it, clearly outline for me your comparison by giving to me the similarities of something or the differences, and not a mix-up where I need to go and guess what goes for what. When you are asked to describe, you provide a detailed feature of an issue or stages of a process in a logical sequence. For example, students, if you are asked to describe a woman, you will obviously start saying, well, it's a lady, she has boobs, you need to describe a woman. She puts on a skirt, she wears heels. Detailed information or features about a lady is what you will give me if I ask you to describe a lady. If you are asked to determine, you have to use information given to you in order to work out an answer. Per se, the exam, I ask you to calculate for me the mean, mode, and median. That you need to determine and show clearly to me how you derive to answer X. That is what it means when you need to determine. When you need to discuss, you give a clear description and then argue about features by pointing out positives and negatives. If you are also asked to explain in the exam, there you describe something and indicate the relationship between things, making clear why and how these features are there. That is why you explain that I am late because the taxi didn't pick me up, or I overslept, that is why I'm late, or the water went and I had to go and get. You explain in detail why something is what it is. Students, these verbs are very important and you need to understand each one of them as you prepare yourself to go write and sit for an exam. Now, this presentation is about the exams, preparing you in what to focus on. But you are not bound to these slides. You have to go through your study guide. You need to acquaint yourself with most of the information that is in the study guide. Here is just a guide, but I still stress on the fact that go through your study guide. I may give you this presentation, but come the exams, you will point fingers and say, but no, Ms. Ausiku, you didn't put that in the slide. The study guide is not excluded, but the slide is just an add-on, specific things that I've picked out. So please also do make use of your study guide. Students, I would like you to look at the following. I would like you to look at the formative assessment. Formative assessment is a formative continuous assessment is an assessment made during the school year in order to improve learning and to help shape and direct teaching learning processes. I would also like you to look at the term evaluation. Remember that we're talking about assessment and evaluation. And evaluation is the process of analyzing, reflecting upon, and summarizing assessment information and making judgments based on the decisions on the information that is being collected. Then I want you to look at standard deviation. Standard deviation, I should speak under correction. It's in Unit 9 or Unit 10. Standard deviation is defined as the positive square root of a variance. The variance is a measure of a squared units and has little meaning with respect to data. So I would like students to go and also look at other materials that can guide you in order for you to clearly understand better what do we mean by standard deviation. Students, you should know what DNEA stands for. It stands for the Directorate of National Examinations and Assessments. Look at the types of grading, students. This is something that this is a topic that most students fail. They fail to define it accordingly. They fail to identify it. And I would like you, for this upcoming exam, I want you to know what it actually is. What is norm reference grading? It is comparing learners to one another to a certain each learner's relative position within a given class or a class group. I would also like you to know that citation reference rate grading is learners' achievement is measured with respect to a specific standard or quality that is based on the quantum of knowledge acquisition ranging from no proficiency to perfect proficiency. I would like you to go on Google search engine, type in norm reference grading or citation reference rating. That will become clear for you. And if you still do not understand it, kindly call me or send me an email. I may take some time to respond, but I will respond to you. I would also like you to remember that you shouldn't only know these two types of grading by name. You should be able to identify it. I should be able to give you certain statements, and you need to identify to me whether this is norm or whether this is citation grading, reference grading. So I think if we want to go deep into detail with it, you need to give me a call or send me a mail, or we can do a WhatsApp call or Skype, and then we can talk about it. There's principles to alternative assessments. Do not confuse the two. We have 12 principles of assessment, and then you have got the principles of alternative assessment. The principles of alternative assessments are as follows. They assume knowledge has multiple meanings. They treat learning as an active process. They emphasize process and product. These principles also focuses on inquiry. They assume the purpose of assessment is facilitate learning. They recognize the connection between cognitive, affective, and connotative abilities. These principles view assessment as subjective and value-laden. They embrace and share models of power and control. They perceive learning as a collaborative process. Now, these alternative principles of assessment, you need to know what each one entail. You cannot use general knowledge with these principles. You should know them by heart, and you should know that when you are talking about principles of alternative assessment, for example, they perceive learning as a collaborative process, you should be able to tell me that teachers and learners are both working hand in hand. They need to express and they need to test their ideas together. The teacher, if the learner is there and the teacher is not there, learning will not take place. If the teacher is absent and if the vice versa, they both need one another. And in order for learning to take place, these two individuals or these two persons must be present. Then we move on to the challenges of coursework. This is also a question that most students struggle with, but the challenges of coursework are, it's time consuming. You need to have time management. You don't have to learners tend to become over enthusiastic. Parents end up doing the work for the learners. It is often difficult for the teacher to determine the appropriate level and standard when the teacher herself does not understand what she wants the learners to do for him or her. Plagiarism is very high. Favors well-to-do learners. Coursework often requires presentation of work. Some parents are not in a financial position to assist their children in buying materials for the project. More appropriate for practical subjects. Adds workload to the teacher because then the teacher needs to go through each and every project. Suppose it's an individual project. Then we look at the advantages of self-assessment to learners. Learners become able to identify their own learning needs. They get to know their strengths and weaknesses. They get to see how they're actually doing in their schoolwork, and it makes them think. They get to know why and when their work is good. They know what to do to improve their work. Learners are able to recognize the next step in learning, and learners feel secure about not always being right. Sometimes it raises the self-esteem of learners, and learners become more positive. Learners become more independent and motivated because then they are working among one another. They see that others have the same problem, and then they tend to work on the problem together. They develop an enthusiasm, and they develop an enthusiasm for reflection. They always want to be given answers because they want to see whether what they have done to themselves is actually correct. And it improves learning. They concentrate on how and rather than what they should learn. Now, as a teacher, like I'm preparing you now for the exams, and I'm telling you now on what to focus on, as a teacher, you also need to prepare your learners. You also need to prepare your students before a test or an exam, because I don't think there is a teacher that actually wants bad results. You also want to see that what I've been doing from January to December, has it actually paid off? So before you even do anything, you need to prepare your learners, as I've said. But what do you need to do? You need to make sure that you need to give the learners the material or the work that has been covered or that will be covered in the test. You need to inform the learners that the exam will be based on multiple choice, true or false short questions. How will the test be graded, or how will the exam be graded, and how does it count towards the final mark? Inform the students that they need to find a place where they are free from distractions. They should have all their things that they need, like their pens, their paper, their calculators, etc. Study time. You need to study time is very important when you are alert and when you are not hungry or when you are not sleepy. You need to set a time aside in order for you to learn. Do not wait on the last minutes Students, don't wait for the last minute. You need to study on a daily basis. Have short sessions with yourself in order for you to be able to remember. Mind you, the mind works in wondrous ways. If you keep on reading every day 3 pages of your work, when you are come the day before the exams, it's a walk in the park for you. You just do revision, and then your exam will go well, and you will ace the test. If you are being tested on 3 chapters, set up 4 study sessions, 1 for each chapter and 1 for the review of the main ideas of all the 3 chapters. Repetition is vital. Read and reread your class notes and relevant chapters in the textbook, making sure you understand the contents. If you don't understand, ask. While you are reviewing your notes, cover them up periodically and summarize them out aloud as far as possible using your own words. Students, this is something you also do not want to do, even if we have to give this advice to our students or our learners. But my advice to you is, when you are preparing for the exam, please make sure that you memorize facts. There are certain things that you can use general knowledge, and there are certain things that you just have to memorize. However, do not condone the fact that you have to memorize with understanding and comprehension. Make sure that you have a timeline of important dates in order of events. Make flashcards for yourselves, but make flashcards because it makes it easier for you to remember what you have done. Make up your own quiz or a test based on what you have studied, or ask a friend or a parent or a sibling to test you on what you have done. Students, there are some definitions that you also need to know. You need to know what is measurement. Measurement is a collection of quantitative data. Quantitative data is information about quantity. This is when you are trying to determine the amount or the extent of some quality. You need to know what is a test. A test is an examination. It is an assessment that measures learners' knowledge and skills. You need to know what is a test. You need to know what is formal assessment. You need to know what is continuous assessment, and once again, you need to know what is evaluation. Moving on. Learners, there are 9 multiple intelligences outlined by Howard Gardner, but in some study guides, I've realized that there are only 7. But if you continue reading on the paragraph immediately after the 7 intelligences have been outlined, you will see that the naturalistic intelligence as well as the existential intelligence is clearly outlined, although not indicated within the 7, but within that paragraph you will realize, because Gardner came up with these 2 extra intelligences after he has already outlined the 7. So your 9 multiple intelligences are the verbal intelligence, the mathematical, the musical, the visual, the body kinesthetic intelligence, inter and intrapersonal intelligences, and then you have got now the 2 extra ones that came after, which is the naturalistic and the existential intelligence. Assessment and evaluation has got different purposes. The purpose for assessment and evaluation is to inform teaching, to promote and encourage learning, to promote optimal individual growth, to motivate, to create learning opportunities, to give feedback and to get feedback, to grade and to assure good quality and high standards. Students, these purposes of assessment and evaluation, students tend to just write their own knowledge. But you will be given a mark if it makes sense, if it's related to what has been outlined here for you. But I would prefer you memorize it and just know it by heart, that there are these purposes, and if you would like, then emphasize on with your own general knowledge, because this is easy marks. You tend to lose marks by just writing general knowledge that you experience in the class. Then we have the nominal, ordinal, and interval ratios. They are in the same chapter where you find your standard deviation. Your nominal ratio is defined as data data defined as a simple naming system. For example, the number pinned on a sport person or a set of countries, that is your nominal scale ratio. Then you have got your ordinal. Your ordinal is items on an ordinal scale. They are set into some kind of an order by their position on a scale. For example, when children are doing a race, there is always the person that comes the first, the second, and the third. That is your ordinal ratio. Then you have got the interval, where this is usually a scale that you are given. From a scale from 1 to 10, can you give me an interval on where your happiness level is being currently rated? Then you just have a ratio. A ratio is a number. The numbers can be compared to two multiples of one another. For example, the person's weight or the number of pizzas one can eat before fainting. Then we move on to continuous assessment to a learner, the benefits of it. Continuous assessment to the learner. A full range of the learner's performance is captured within continuous assessment. The learner's strengths and weaknesses are also going to be diagnosed. Enrichment activities for pupils who are working at or above the expected grade can be designed. Learner's progress is assessed and there is some time to correct problems if there are any. It provides information on achievement and of particular levels of skills, understanding, and knowledge rather than achievement of certain marks or scores. It enables pupils to monitor their achievement of grade level goals and to visualize their progress towards these goals before it is too late to achieve them. Moving on. Then we have validity. You have reliability and you have validity. In this case, we will look at validity. Validity is important to consider when setting up question papers. Validity in assessment refers to measuring what it says it is measuring to be it knowledge, understanding, subject, content, skills, information, behaviors, etc. Validity in assessment will constitute assessment procedures, methods, instruments, and materials have to match what is actually being assessed. Now, validity is very important because a learner is assessed on research skills. For example, however, the learner's ability to write may not necessarily provide evidence that the learner is able to do a certain type of research. The assessment must assess the learner's ability to perform. In this case, the learner should be assessed on various activities of stages of the research. For example, the formulation of the research question, your literature review, development of research instruments, collection of data, and analysis of data and report writing. Then you have got the 12 principles of assessment. Students, I'm not going to go through all these 12 principles, but you should know them. There are 12. Assessment should be valid, it should be appropriate, it should be fair, it should be accurate. It should cover it should be able to be integrated into the learning and teaching cycle. Assessment should draw a wide range of evidence. It should be manageable, reliable, valid, transformable, and educative. People, you need to know all these 12 principles, and you cannot list them in your own general knowledge. You must know them by heart. There are 12. Once again, do not confuse them with alternative principles of assessment. These are just the 12 principles of assessment. You should be able to discuss them. Usually it comes with 24 marks. So this is easy marks that you can get. You just need to read these 12 principles on a daily basis. And if you read them 2, 3, 4 times, I should think the 5th time you should have them, and you should at least be able to name them, even if you are describing them with general knowledge, discussing them with general knowledge. Now, students, there's a problem that I always encounter. Let's take, for example, assessment should be valid. Students go, assessment should be valid. Okay, a mark. But then a student goes further and says, assessment should be valid when marking or when setting. You are not answering what I want. You can't use the word valid again. You need to explain to me why assessment needs to be valid. Please, students, you can't say assessment needs to be transformable. I will give you the mark, but then to explain it, it should just be transformable from one person to another. You haven't actually told me anything. You need to understand and comprehend the 12 principles and list them and discuss them correctly. Students, when you are setting a question paper, there is a criteria that you need to follow. You need to make sure that you define the content. You need to select topics and types of assessment. You need to gather all the relevant material from all the relevant sources that you can actually get in order to combine them to set up a good and well-structured paper. You need to construct a range of questions with sample answers and marking scheme. You need to check questions against the Bloom's taxonomy that I did to you just right after I introduced myself. Complete an assessment grid, check marks, type paper, check for mistakes, have the paper or sample paper checked in marking scheme checked by a colleague, and then lastly you send it to a moderator. Now what happens is students read this, they realize that some of what is written here is what actually happens at their schools, some of those that are already teaching, forgetting that this is a set criteria. Now they just write for me what they do at school. I look at the one textbook, I look at the other textbook, then I compare. I will give you a mark, but you are not actually telling me what I want to know. What you are practicing at school and what is in the study guide is two different things. That is your experience. Maybe you are bending the rules somehow. But I want you to stick to this criteria. It is fixed, it's standard, and I would like you to know it by heart. Then you have got the backbone of assessment and evaluation. And this is the 3 learning domains by Bloom's taxonomy. You have got the cognitive domain that deals with the intellectual capability and skills of a person. And then this domain is derived from different cognitive categories where you should be able to use your knowledge, you should be able to comprehend, you should be able to apply, use your application, analyze, synthesize, and evaluate. This is your intellectual capability, what you are actually able to do when it comes to your intellectual capability. Can you apply? Do you have the knowledge? Do you understand what you are reading? And this is one of the things that one looks at when you are setting a paper, because you need to look at, am I working with special children? Is this child slow? Is this child very fast? Or this is what you need to look at when you are setting a paper. You need to look at the cognitive domain. You also need to look at the affective domain. Now, the affective domain has to do with emotions and feelings. Now, these feelings, you need to be able to see whether at what level of feeling is this learner. You need to be able to identify how this learner can this learner express himself or herself. This is actually what the affective domain entails. You also need to realize that, students, you fail to spell this word correctly. Affective, not effective domain. Please distinguish between the two, because if you say affect, I will give you I will not mark it correctly. You have to spell it correctly, because if you spell it wrongly, then that is a different meaning. It means something totally different. Students, then you have got the psychomotor domain. Now, the psychomotor domain deals with the physical ability of a learner. It deals with whether this learner is he accurate when he's busy with physical movement, how smooth is he, or what type of force is he using. This is the physical capability of a learner. Is this learner able to produce after he has produced a product, after he has actually try to build something with his fingers or with his hands. Is this learner actually able to do so? So these 3 domains you need to keep in mind when you want to set an activity or when you want to assess learners on a specific topic or a specific something. Students, this brings me to the last part of my presentation. Students, I would like to motivate you all. Please feel free to contact me if you are having any problems. If you don't try, you will never know. And if you don't give it your all, you will obviously get very little out of it. So I urge you to study hard for your exams. Good luck with the exams. And I leave you with this beautiful quote that I love. The sum of small efforts repeated day in, day out is you have to repeat what you want to do every day. Because if you do not repeat what you want to achieve on a daily basis, you will not achieve anything. Students, do not be afraid to fail, but be afraid not to try. Every accomplishment starts with a decision to try. So try and try and try. And I thank you very much.